Let's start our session with the word of prayer. Our gracious God, we want to thank you that we can come together today in this manner to study your word. And today we want to look at the geography of the Holy Land. Lord, give us a good perspective of the geography so that we can better understand your word and better understand your plan for the world. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Today, we are going to be looking at the geography of the Bible, and we'll be looking at various aspects. Today's notes are relatively simple because most of the time you have to look up into the screen. Okay, you're looking at maps, you're not looking at words. All right, so in that sense, today's lesson is very simple. Okay, except that we would need you to try to draw the Holy Land. Okay, the and um, and so, in that sense, if you can get that done, it will be wonderful on a piece of paper. I was trying to link it up so that I can show you how to do it, but sad to say, I'll have to just describe, and you have to. Well, maybe we can do it. We don't know. Okay, we'll try. All right. I'm technically challenged. Okay, so okay, today we want to look at the geography of the Bible. Now, first, we want to look at Israel in God's plan for the world. So, God is doing something for the world. His plan is worldwide. He has created the whole world. And so, He has chosen a certain piece of land on which to make Himself known and through which the rest of the world gets to know Him. Now, this is an ancient map, and it is quite a useful map because it explains to you in a schematic fashion what the world is like. Okay? So, if you were to look at the world as three triangles, you will notice that Europe is at one end, Asia is at another end, and then Africa is in the south. Okay? And right in the center is the Middle East. Okay? So, this is why, in a certain sense, it is the center of the world. Now, geographically, though, if you were to look at the map of the world, you'll know that Europe and Asia is a bit of an artificial divide. This is a political divide, meaning where does Asia start and where does Europe end? Nobody knows. Okay, you know right now there is Ukraine, which is considered Eastern Europe, right? And then when you reach Russia, have you reached Asia yet, or not quite? No, is that part of Asia? Well, then there are the Ural Mountains that separates, and then you go on to Siberia and Eastern Russia, and that part becomes Asia. So it is as much a cultural divide as it is a geographical divide. Now, when you just very briefly, when you look at the map of the world and you look at Europe and Asia as one, or Eurasia as some people call it, you'll notice that this is actually where the action really is. The world wars are fought there. First World War, Second World War. And if you look at the map of the world again, America is actually by itself. Australia is by itself. It is not really linked to these countries. So they are relatively isolated, separated by oceans. But the major land masses, Eurasia, Europe to the west, Asia to the east, and then Africa to the south are connected together. So in a certain sense, you can say that this is the ideal spot from where God makes himself known, because it is from this area that the rest of the world can be reached. Okay, it's about as central as it can get. Not central in terms of exact center in geography, but central in terms of population masses. Okay, so this is actually where we are at today. Okay, so if you look at the map of the world, you see Israel there is a very, very tiny piece of land. It really is, it really sits at the junction that the rest of the world gets into Africa, right? So it really is the gateway to Africa. Now, by the way, this map that you're looking at, some of you may be aware that this map is not a proper representation of the world. Okay. For example, if you look at Greenland on top, there's a lot of talk about Greenland today. Why is Greenland so huge? Okay. Greenland is not huge, all right, and not that size anyway. It is because, you know, the longitude lines curve go up to join the earth, right? So when they try to make a flat map, they flatten it out. So all the small spaces become expanded, okay? And that is why Greenland is so big, all right? So, but in reality, Greenland is not that big, and Africa is not that small. Africa is much bigger than what you see on the map, okay, and much longer. So then what you see here is that Israel really sits in the center of the world, okay? And God has chosen this tiny piece of land for its political location rather than anything else. Okay, so in our focus on Israel, meaning the land of Israel, we will take a look at the world of the patriarchs. Okay, now first we need to understand that in this Middle East area, okay, to focus on the Middle East, the first thing you need to look out for is the Mediterranean Sea. Can you all spot the Mediterranean Sea? Okay, take a bit of time. If you can spot the Mediterranean Sea, you give me a thumbs up or something. Yeah. Okay. Can you all see that? Okay. So there's a Mediterranean Sea. Okay. It's called the Mediterranean Sea, by the way, means that it is in the middle of land. Mediterra. Okay. In the middle of land. So if you look at the Mediterranean Sea, it is connected on the other end of the map that you cannot see on the western end, just by a very narrow strip of water to the ocean. Okay, so basically you have land almost all around the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so this is modern Israel. Now, when you look at this part here, you would, okay, so this is, are you able to see my pen? Can? Okay, good. So you're talking about this piece of land over here, right? And this arc over here is called the Fertile Crescent. Okay, so in between is largely desert. Regardless of what country is there, in between is largely desert. So people do not cross from the Gulf over here straight through to the land of Israel. They always go by this arc. So, for example, the Abraham was from Ur of the Chaldeans. So Ur is around here, and then he moved up to Syria, and then he got stuck at Haran. Okay, his father got stuck at Haran. After his father died, then he came down to the land of Israel. So it's always traveled across this arc. Okay, it's always a travel along this arc, which is called the Fertile Crescent. Okay, you would notice here there are two rivers here, Tigris and the Euphrates. Okay, and these two rivers water the land. Mesopotamia is basically what it means, between two rivers. Potamos in Greek is river. So Meso is in between two rivers. So that's why it's called Mesopotamia. Okay, it is in between two rivers here. And that makes it a fertile crescent. And then you have Syria over here. And you have Egypt that is the first country going into Africa. Okay. All right. So now that we have seen the line map of the Old Testament, and we understand that the key feature for most of us in our studies for this course in studying the Bible, the geography that you need to note is the Mediterranean Sea. Almost everything happens around the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so later on, the Roman Empire is all around the Mediterranean Sea. So the Mediterranean Sea is a critical feature for you to understand. Okay, so this is the relief map of the world of the patriarchs. You will notice Canaan. Remember the Mediterranean Sea, right? So to the east of the Mediterranean Sea, you see the word Canaan there. So that is where it is, where we are talking about the promised land, the land of Israel. And then along the Fertile Crescent, you'll notice there's nothing in between the Fertile Crescent, okay, because it's all desert. People don't live there normally anyway. It's the Arabian desert. And then you would see near the Persian Gulf, Ur of the Chaldees, right? So that is actually where Abraham came from. So he went and traveled up on the Fertile Crescent until he reached a place called Padan Aram. Okay? That is where they stopped, where he and his family stopped. And after his father died, then he went south towards the promised land in the land of Canaan. Okay? So, and this is the perspective that we have over there. And then farther south, you see the Sinai Desert. Okay, can you see my arrow? Sinai Desert over here. Okay, and then you see the word here in Egypt, Hyksos, right? Okay, there is an interesting term called the Hyksos. By way of just introduction, there is a possibility that the Hyksos are related to the pharaohs during the time of the Exodus. You will notice one little line in Exodus where there arose a pharaoh who knew not Joseph, right? And then he started bullying all the Hebrew people. And who is this pharaoh who knew not Joseph? Some people suspect there was a change of dynasty. Okay, and then there is another phrase there that says that we need to contain the population growth of the Hebrews, okay? Lest they multiply and they overwhelm us. Now, what is the likelihood of the Hebrews overwhelming the local Egyptians? Okay, not much, right? Because no matter how, they will not multiply that quickly. But some have suggested that it was actually the Hyksos who were ruling at that time. Okay, and that the Hyksos were afraid that the Hebrews would overtake them in terms of numbers, and the Hebrews were loyal to the previous dynasty. And if the previous dynasty stages a comeback, they can count on the support of the Hebrew people. So the Hyksos were therefore the persecutors of the Hebrew people. I'm not saying this is it, but I'm saying this is definitely one possibility during that time. Okay, and then you see the island Cyprus here. Cyprus will come up from time to time in the New Testament narrative. Okay, so Cyprus is this island that is in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, farther out here you see the Aegean Sea, and then after that, further out you also see the Adriatic Sea, which you cannot see on this map. Okay, so then you also see this nation here called the Hittites. At one time, people thought that the Bible invented these people because they could find no evidence of Hittites. Later, they found that there was a huge dynasty or civilization called the Hittites. And this is more or less where they are located. Okay, so this is the world of the patriarchs. You may not remember a lot of things, but you must remember the Fertile Crescent and that the land of Canaan is part of the Fertile Crescent. And almost everything that you read about happens on this map. So, for example, Assyria. Assyria is the country that conquered northern kingdom Israel. And then there's the old Babylonian kingdom here. Okay, so Babylon, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia, the Zagros mountain and all that. So this whole area here constantly imposed itself onto this land over here. And this is because it is primarily the trade route between Africa and the rest of the world. So when Egypt is strong, Egypt would impose itself on Canaan. When the countries along the Fertile Crescent are strong, they would impose a rule on Canaan. And of course, when you go to westward, then you are looking at Europe. Okay, so this is then the rest, the map of the world of the patriarchs. Now, the Bible is sometimes called the land in between. Okay, the land in between because it's always between things. Okay? In a certain sense, everything is between things, but more so in the land of Israel than any other place because it lies at the crossroads between two great continents. And on the western side, they have the Mediterranean Sea, and on the eastern side, they have the desert. Okay? So in that sense, it is a land in between. All right. Now, how to draw the map of Israel? Okay. So you need to identify now to zoom in on that little piece of land called Canaan, and you need to identify and see how to do it. So this is a good time for you to take out your pen and paper and get to learn how to draw the map of Israel. Okay. It's really quite easy to draw. Of course, we don't expect you to get all the little indentations right. Okay, they are all, you just have to draw a non-straight line in a wiggly manner that will work. Okay, so how you do is this. There is one J here. There's one J, little J here. Okay, so you draw a little J here, and this is actually Tyre. So at the bottom of the J is Tyre, and this little promontory that sticks out over here is actually Mount Carmel. Okay, so because it is a mountain, it kind of sticks out and it doesn't get eroded away by the sea. Okay, so this little promontory here is Mount Carmel. So when you want to draw Israel, you just start with a J here and then another long J. Okay, so you're basically doing two J's. Okay, so you try and do that, draw two J's. Okay, all right. So you know that the start of the first J, the end of the first J is the start of one part of Israel, the end of Tyre. Okay. Okay. Now, straight directly across from the J is the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee, or the Kinneret. So this is called the Kinneret. In Hebrew, it is called Kinneret, not Galilee, because it is the shape of a harp. Okay, so you can draw like a triangle in this manner, okay, like a harp. So along the first J, you move inland a little bit. Okay, you draw a little harp there, and that forms the Sea of Galilee. Now, this northern part here that you find a line, the river feeding into Galilee, I believe today is almost gone or not there. There's a little marshy land here that feeds into this thing. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. I mean, in history. Okay, so but during the time of Christ, they did exist, and there's a little tributary or river that feeds into the Sea of Galilee over here. Okay, so this is where you draw your first J, then you draw your second J down, right? When you draw your second J, you add in the Dead Sea. So directly under the Sea of Galilee, you can draw the Dead Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is just like, you imagine the Dead Sea is just like a bit of a rectangle, okay, with one difference. On the Jordan side, on Moab side, there is this little thing that sticks into the Dead Sea, and it is another word for it is the tongue, Tongue, because it is like a tongue sticking in there. Okay, so this is called the tongue of the Dead Sea. Okay, can you all see it? So it is like drawing a little rectangle. Okay, I mean, of course, not smooth, even rectangle, but maps are never smooth and even. And then you make the provision for a little tongue here. Okay. Sometimes this tongue is flooded, sometimes it is not. Okay. Where the water level rises in the Dead Sea, this tongue will be flooded and you will not see it. Where the water level is lower, you actually see the tongue of the Dead Sea. Okay. And today it is in the Jordan area. So the eastern part is Jordan, the western part is modern day Israel. All right. Then you draw a line joining the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. That is your river Jordan. Okay, that's your River Jordan. So you draw a little squiggly line down, and the word Jordan means the descender. Okay, the descender because of the steep decline. There is a very steep uh, height from which the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. And of course, many of you already know why it is called the Dead Sea. It's called the Dead Sea because there's no outlet to the water, and the water just gets saltier and saltier and saltier, and everything dies when it gets enters. There's no fish, no life in the Dead Sea because the water keeps evaporating, right? So it is full of minerals, it is full of good stuff, but it is very, very dense. If you have seen pictures of people vacationing in the Dead Sea, you'll find that you actually cannot sink in the Dead Sea. Okay, you always float because the water is so dense. It's also a place where you don't want the water to get into your eyes. Okay, you would have very big regrets if the water of the Dead Sea should get into your eye. Okay, all right. So we recap, okay? You start by drawing a little J, and of course you can draw farther up north if you want to, okay? And then you draw another J down, and then from that first J, you go inland and you draw the Sea of Galilee, okay? You may or may not want to draw the thing up there, it's up to you. And then close to the smoothing out of your second incomplete J, you draw a little rectangle with a provision for a tongue on the eastern shore of the Jordan River. Okay? So this is your Sea of Galilee. The Dead Sea there. So now you would find from the top of the Dead Sea, you draw a straight line out to the Mediterranean Sea, and what you find is the city of Jerusalem, right? Can you see that? The star there, the city of Jerusalem, okay? So about 1/3 way, if you cut it into 3/3, if you cut it into 3/3, you'll find that Jerusalem is about 1/3 from the Dead Sea or 2/3 way from the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so the top of the Dead Sea, you use that to orientate, to draw a map of Jerusalem, a little square or something to indicate it's the capital, and that is Jerusalem. Okay, this is Samaria. Samaria is the capital of modern day not modern day, ancient day northern kingdom, right? Shechem was another important place in Judges. Bethel is another place that was where Jacob met God. Megiddo is another place. Megiddo is in the Galilee region. Megiddo is ringed by highlands, okay, and this is where it is. Okay. Then when you look here, you would see northern cities like Hatzor and Dan. So remember, the Danites went north and conquered the area. And so many times you get the expression from Dan to Beersheba. Beersheba is to the south here, right? So that became an expression from north to south, okay, from Dan to Beersheba. So Dan is here, Beersheba is here. All right. And then you see the kingdom of Moab over here. The Moab is over here. So Moab and Ammon. The Ammonites and the Moabites, you remember, are descendants of Lot. Okay? The Edomites were the descendants of Esau. So they occupied this piece of land. So when the Israelites were going into the land of Israel to claim the promised land, there's actually a road that cuts through here. It's called the King's Highway. And you'll notice that these cities are in a line, right? And these cities are in a line because there's actually a road cutting through. So Israel had asked permission of Edom, say, please let us cross through. Okay, we will not drink your water, eat your stuff, whatever we eat or drink, we'll pay for it. The same thing they asked the Moabites, and they were rejected by both the Edomites and the Moabites, right? And this is the place where they sought to go through. And then when they entered into the promised land, they actually cut into the Jordan River from here, and that was Jericho, okay? The first city that fell. So this area here is called the this is the Transjordan area, okay? And on this side of the River Jordan is the Cisjordan area, okay? So this is Transjordan, okay? And this is Cisjordan. Recently, you have been hearing in the news about the Palestinian chant from the river to the sea. Okay, what does it mean from the river to the sea? Well, they are referring to the Jordan River and then to the Mediterranean Sea. So when they say that their land is from the river to the sea, they are saying that the entire land belongs to them. There is no place for the Jews. Okay, so when people chant these things, they don't really understand what they are chanting. They are basically chanting for the genocide of the Jews when they say that, Palestine is from the river to the sea. Okay, so this is the river, the Jordan River. So this is the Jordan River here, and that's the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, the Philistines are over here, and today it is the Gaza Strip. It's the Gaza Strip today, where the land of the Philistines were. I think terms are very important. In today's world, you talk about the West Bank. The UN, for example, says that the West Bank does not belong to Israel. But the West Bank is basically Judea and Samaria. Okay, so they are saying that this spot like this, does not belong to Israel. This land here. But if you change the name, instead of calling it West Bank, you call it Judea and Samaria, then it becomes very clear whose land this is. Okay, that the Jews have been living in Judea and Samaria all these years. All right. So have you all drawn the map yet of Israel? Okay. So now this is the relief map. This is the relief map, and we have taken away all the cities and all that. You're just looking at the map itself. Huh? So here is this green part. This is the Mediterranean Sea, of course, this blue part. So this is called the Mediterranean coastal plains. Okay, so this is the coast and this is the plains. Okay, and then the second thing to note here are the central mountains. So this is like a spine going down the central mountains, and the land in between is called the Shephelah or the rolling hill. So you start from plains here and then you go upwards into the mountainous areas. Okay. And then over here, you find that, you remember this is Sea of Galilee, right? Then the Jordan River, then the Dead Sea. This is actually the Jordan Rift Valley, okay? Basically, there is a geographical, geologic movement underneath that caused a major rift, and this thing extends all the way into Africa, into the African Rift Valley. Okay, so this is the lay of the land, and these waters get trapped here, and then these sides are all very steep, because it is part of this Rift Valley. So you notice that the mountains here just drop off very abruptly, right, into the plains of Jordan. Okay, so there are two parts where there are plains, the coastal plains, and then the Jordan Valley. These are the two places where there are plains in Israel. The rest of it is low-lying mountains or high mountains, okay, in the central spine area. At the southern part over here is the Negev. The word Negev actually means south. So the Negev is also used to refer to the wilderness or the desert area over here. Okay? So this is the Negev. So then, so get to recognize this map. You see over here your first J, the mountain sticking out there. This is the Mount Carmel area. Okay, so Mount Carmel is really very close to the coast, and it sort of sticks out there, and that forms the first J of Israel. Okay, let us look now at some of the mountainous regions of Israel. The mountains are actually quite important in the geography of Israel. It is used to describe various things. Okay, so like you see here, first Mount Carmel, then you see the Kishore River. The Kishon River is not actually a river. It is more like the Jews call it the Nahal, or the Arabs call it a Wadi. Okay? So it can actually dry up during the dry season. And when it rains, all the water rush in. So when you read in Judges Sisera, that Sisera's chariots got drowned and got stuck. And it was actually this Kishon River here. Okay, so the riverbed is perfect for chariots because it's level, okay? Except when it rains. So when the rain came suddenly out of season and all the chariots were trapped, that was basically God's deliverance of the Israelites during the time of the judges against the Syrian king. Mount Tabor over here is an interesting mountain because if you look at this mountain, it is a cone. You know how people normally draw mountain as a little cone, right? Well, but in reality, mountains don't look like that. Mountains look long from one angle and look pointy from another angle. So Mount Tabor is quite a cute mountain in the sense that it looks the same from everywhere. Okay, it is a cone, a conical mountain. Okay, just a little factoid. You read about this in Deborah's battles. Okay, at Mount Tabor. Then there's Mount Gilboa, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim. Okay, so these are all some of where some of these battles are fought. Okay, so remember the Mediterranean Sea and Dead Sea over here. Then this on the Jordan side, on the Transjordan area, you have the Jabbok River. So if you want to make your map a little bit more sophisticated, you can draw the Jabbok River in because that is, I think, more or less a perpetual river. It doesn't dry up. Okay, so that is an important river. Some have suggested that when John the Baptist was baptizing, it was along the Jabbok River, but we don't know for sure. Okay, then this is Mount Nebo. Now, you all will remember from your quizzes that Mount Nebo was where Moses died, right? So before they entered into the promised land across the Jordan River, uh, Moses went up Mount Nebo and that was where he died. Okay, this is the Arnon River. Okay, this is Arnon River. And yeah, and what you see here is the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so okay, so these are the things for you to take note of. Now, Jerusalem is also called Mount Zion. So Mount Zion is basically the same general region, okay, as Jerusalem. Mount Moriah is stated over here as a separate place. According to some people, we do not know whether it is true or not because some of these places are a little bit tricky. The Dome of the Rock today, okay, that is in the Jerusalem area, is actually Mount Moriah, where where Abraham placed Isaac to be sacrificed. Of course, according to the Muslims, they say it is where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Ishmael. Okay, so so that Dome of the Rock, that rock is supposedly that place at Mount Moriah. Okay, so there is debate as to identification of specific spots. It's not that precise, but this is where we are at. I'd just like to recall your attention that there is a difference between pre-literary history. Okay, so there is a time in history where people do not yet write things down. Then there is a literary prehistory where people have started writing, but they don't actually record events. Then, of course, there's literary history. Okay, so so when you talk about some of these places and all that, you are talking about that little transition between literary prehistory and literary history. Okay, and so we do not really have very good records of that. Now, literature is not the only way that we use to uncover things. A lot of it also has to do with archaeology. So the literature that we read is the literary record of what happens. And then we compare that against the archaeological evidence and records of it. Okay, so praise God, the archaeology has substantiated the Bible. And in fact, many times for archaeologists to study archaeology, the first thing they turn to is the Bible. Okay, so they see what the Bible describes, and then they try to follow it to find the locations that the Bible is talking about. So that is how important the Bible is as a source material. But there are certain other things that we understand much better because of archaeological finds. Okay, because sometimes things don't describe things as fully as when we visually see it. Okay, so then you look at the bodies of water. The bodies of water, Sea of Galilee is a fertile sea where you have a lot of fish. The Nile tilapia is the main fish. They call it St. Peter's fish. It's basically a Nile tilapia that lives in the Sea of Galilee. Okay, and as I mentioned to you over here, Dead Sea is kind of dead. Okay, no life over there. Okay. All right. So Israel today. Israel today is basically the Cisjordan area, with some claims that parts of Judea and Samaria should actually go to the Palestinians. All right. There is a note on the rainfall in Israel. I have it in your notes for you. In Deuteronomy 11:10, this is what the Lord tells them. For the land that you're entering to take possession of it, is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and irrigated it like a garden of vegetables. But the land that you are going over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water by the rain from heaven. Okay, so Egypt, farming in Egypt is done through irrigation because through the Nile River. But this is different when they enter into this land. When they enter into this land, water comes through rain. Okay, there is hardly any way to irrigate, as you can see. You know, the Jordan River is fresh water, but you cannot really irrigate it because you are going uphill, right? So God warns them that the land that He is bringing them into is not a land that is cultivated through irrigation, but a land that is cultivated by dependence on rain. Okay, so they depend on the rainfall. And in Deuteronomy 11:14, He will give the rain of your land in its season, the early rain and the later rain, that you may gather in your grain and your wine and your oil. Okay? So there are two rainy seasons. There's the early rain or former rains, and there's the late or latter rain. So the early rain is in autumn, is around November, December. Okay, that is where there's called the early rains. And although that for us is the end of the year, but for them it is the start of the year. Okay, so it's just like in many Western universities today, the start of the academic year is in September, right? So October or August, around that period. Okay, so in these countries, the start of the year is in the fall season. So there's the early rain, and the latter rain is in the spring season, that is March or April season. Okay, so this is how the people are to live. They are to live by these two cycles, and they are to depend on God for the rain, and that is to keep them humble. It is not something that is within their control. It is out of their control, and therefore they have to depend on God. In James 5:7, it says, "Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruits of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. Okay, so it's the same thing. Early rains in autumn or fall, late rains in the spring. Okay. Now, there is quite a bit of talk about the latter rain in prophecy. Okay. So first, we need to understand that the latter rain actually refers to the spring rains. Okay, so let's kind of geographically locate it. Okay, that the latter rain actually refers to the spring rains. And the postulation is this. Some people have said that the early church is the early rains, okay? And the end time revival is now, and it is the latter rain, okay? So everybody kind of agree that the end times refers to any time after the death of Christ to his second coming. But then some people like to split it into two different parts, the early rains and the latter rain theology. So let's just take a look to see whether or not this really holds water. Okay. In Joel chapter 2, and that is the prophecy about Pentecost, right? Coming of the Holy Spirit. In Joel chapter 2, verse 23, it says, Be glad, O children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication, and he has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the latter rain as before. Okay? So here you see in Joel's prophecy that the early and the latter rains are viewed together. So it is not a question of separating early rains and latter rains, but both early and latter rains are a blessing from God in the prospering of God's people. And so you can do some more study about that. We're not doing a theology study here, but I want you to know that sometimes some of these terms that people are referring to need to go back to the geography of the land. Okay, you cannot just pull things out of the air and say early rains means this and latter rain means that. Okay, you must ask yourself, what did it mean to the people of that time? And so when they say early rains, it's a fall rains. When they say latter rains, it's a spring rain. All right. So and I think we need to understand that. Okay. Okay. Now rainfall, the world of the New Testament. Okay. Now, for the world of the New Testament, you need to understand again, it sort of goes around the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, but it is an expanded version. The Roman Empire is given in red. So you notice that it is all around the sea, right? This is the only gap here that goes into the ocean. So it is called the Mediterranean Sea because it is a land that is inside the middle of the sea, right? So this is a sea. The only gap into the ocean is here. Okay, so this part is normally called the Mediterranean, and this is the Aegean, and this is the Adriatic. I think so. One of these. Okay, so this is the world of the New Testament. Now, the empire of the first century, which is what we're looking at, the first 100 years, because the Roman Empire grew and then shrank and all that, so we cannot go through the entire story of the Roman Empire, nor do we want to, but just to slice it at a snapshot, the first century, that the first 100 years, okay, is where our focus is at. Now, during this time, we have what is called the Pax Romana, or the Peace of Rome. The Pax Romana is a peace that Rome imposed on its territory, and so it is called the Pax Romana. Now, so why did Rome go about conquering so many places? As you will find out, many empires grow unintentionally. Okay, so Rome was not a superpower; it was just a city. But over here in the south in Africa was Carthage. So the Carthaginians and the Romans fought pitched battles called the Punic Wars. You know, Hannibal the Great and all that. So Hannibal eventually lost to Rome. And because Hannibal lost, then Rome gained control of the northern coast of Africa. So one battle after another, they kind of slowly won, and then they expanded the empire. Some of it is out of greed, some of it is out of necessity and security, some of it is out of opportunity. Okay, so if you look at the growth of the Roman Empire, it is not something so simple or straightforward. Okay, so this is called the Pax Romana. It is called the peace, but it is a peace through subjugation, meaning everybody is bullied into submitting to Rome. Now, so why did Rome bother to have such a big empire? Well, the reasons are actually quite complex. Some people say it is because of tax. Actually, it is not so much tax. Rome did not really tax the people so severely. If you look at the Roman records, their taxation was not anything worse than what you might find in a Western country today. Okay, but it is the resentment that the people felt that they were taxed by Rome that made them so angry about Roman taxation. Okay, it was more about trade. Rome cannot sustain itself because it's a city. And so a lot of grain comes from Egypt. Egypt was the breadbasket of the world, and they would sail to Rome to disembark their grain. Okay, so Rome prospered because of trade and many of these other things. And once something is gained, it is very hard to let it go again. Okay, now, so this is the Roman Empire. So this is how the different empires look like during that period. So you will see here various places that the Bible talks about. So like Macedonia. Macedonia is where Alexander the Great started his conquest, and that set the stage for the New Testament. Of course, this is Rome. This is the leg that kicks the boot, Sicily. Rome is over here, okay, over this side, all right. Then there were all the battles against the French, that is the Gauls over here. And then Britain was over here, where they briefly went into Britain, and then they came back again. Then they call this place Germania, where today is modern day Germany, but a much smaller place. Okay, this whole region here is Asia Minor. And then, of course, you have Palestine, Judea, and all that. Mesopotamia over here, the land between two rivers, Mesopotamia. Armenia was a very significant country during those times. But during the Ottoman Empire, there was a genocide, and over 1 million Armenians were killed by the Turks. So this was a former Armenia. Armenia was also the first place that adopted Christianity as its official religion. Okay, so there are still Christians in Armenia who speak Aramaic. So these are some of the names that you are going to see mentioned in the New Testament world. Now, these are the things that you would see happening in Acts. Okay, it looks a bit complicated, but it's not. So I assure you. And these are Paul's missionary journeys. Okay, so this is Paul's first missionary journey. Paul left from Antioch in Syria. This is Syrian Antioch. And he started by going to Cyprus, to Salamis, and then to Paphos. And then he went to Perga. And that was when he reached this place, that was where John Mark left them, if you remember the story. And that created that controversy. And then he went inwards to another Antioch. This is called the Antioch of Pisidia, or the Pisidian Antioch. And then he went down to Iconium, to Lystra, Derbe. Okay? And then they went back along the coast again, and then they returned to Antioch. Okay, so this is the first missionary journey. Now, there are two Galatias. There is a northern Galatia and a southern Galatia. Two different parts were called Galatia. And most people believe that when Paul wrote the epistle to the Galatians, it's to the southern Galatians. That means it's to this part that you're talking about. Pisidian Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe, and that is the area that to which he was addressing the epistle of Galatians. So if you read your notes on Galatians, you'll know that Galatians was likely the first New Testament book to be written. Okay, it's a very, very early work, even before the Gospels were written. Okay, so this is Paul's first missionary journey, and the book of Galatians is written to the Galatians of this particular region over here. Now, this is Paul's second missionary journey, and Paul's second missionary journey, of course, is even more dramatic. Okay, but he starts overland from Antioch over here, and he goes to Tarsus, back to his hometown, and then to Derbe, Lystra. So he's going by the opposite direction now, right? Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, Antioch. And then we are told that they were trying to get to Bithynia. They were trying to go north into this area called Bithynia. And so, you see this map here also called Galatia. So there is another Galatia that is Persinus and Sychra, Tavium. So the Northern Galatian theory says that the epistle was written to these cities, but most people accept the Southern Galatian theory, it is written to these cities. Okay, so now coming back to the story. So Paul from Antioch was trying to get up north, but God prevented him. So and he also tried to go east to Ephesus, but God also prevented him. So he had no choice but to go northwest to Troas. Okay, and then when he was in Troas, that was when he received the vision, the dream of the Macedonian call from the man of Macedonia saying, "Come over and help us." Okay. By the way, Troas, just in case you all do not know, Troas is also reputed, now I won't stake my life on it, but it's also reputed to be the other name for Troy. So Helen of Troy is this place called Troas, okay? And then they went and sailed over. So because of this vision, they sailed over to Neapolis and then to Philippi, and they founded the church in Philippi. Okay. Then they went to Amphipolis, Apollonia, and then to Thessalonica, to Berea, where you read about all these stories in Acts. And then he went to Athens, okay, where he had a conversation with the people at the Areopagus. Then to Corinth, Cenchrea, and then now he went to Ephesus. So if you look at Corinth here, you'll notice that Corinth is on an isthmus. It is between the Aegean Sea and the Adriatic Sea, right? I mentioned to you all about where Corinth lies. So Corinth is a very important seaport because it straddles the Adriatic Sea on one side and the Aegean Sea on the other side. And so when people want to trade, sometimes they just dock here and then they transport overland, through Corinth. Okay. Then Paul went to Ephesus, and then moved down and went back by sea to Caesarea. From Caesarea, he went to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem, he went back to Antioch. Okay, so that is Paul's second missionary journey. Now, by the way, if you are looking at Greece, the northern part of Greece is Macedonia, and the southern part of Greece, where people talk about the five fingers of Greece, the fingers of Greece, that part is actually Greece proper or Achaia. But the northern part is Macedonia, where Alexander the Great came from. Okay, so this is Paul's third missionary journey. So this journey is even more complicated. Each journey became more extensive. And so you see that he started from Antioch, went to Cilicia, went inland the same way, but he went to Ephesus first this time, not on the way back. Went to the Troas area, crossed over to Philippi, went to Achaia, to Corinth, went back up to Philippi, back to Troas, and then to Miletus area, and then and then he went up down to this way. Okay, so that is the third missionary journey. and he ended up in Jerusalem where he got arrested. Okay, so that was Paul's third missionary journey. Oh, this is Paul's journey to Rome. So he started in Jerusalem, he got arrested, and then he went by this way, mostly the coastal route as a prisoner. And then he went all the way, Fair Havens in Crete and all that. And then he ended up in Rome, where he was a prisoner. Okay. So these are the maps for you to be aware of. And I hope when you are reading the Old Testament and the New Testament, you get a better idea. For the Old Testament, most of the happenings are east of the land of Israel. For the New Testament, most of the things that are happening happen towards the western part of the of Israel into the sea. Okay, so this is basically what you have for the land of Israel. Okay, any questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, thank you very much for your attention.